let me just run through a year. For me, this is the structure by which I cover these topics. I think we have time to go spend 20 minutes or half an hour sort of walking through a growing season. And what would you do in October and why? What would you do in November and why? For me, that's the simple answer to your question, Beth, about what are the 5 things I can do. So I like to think of, and the problem is we're in the middle of the growing season now, and I'm going to start in October, so we'll have to wait until we get to now. But from what I've said you should have done in October, November, December, January, February, March, you probably can think about some things you should do now. So things where you're not doing everything you could. I like to think of the growing season as one growing season beginning when the other growing season is ending. Think of the growing season as a cyclical process, or however you want to draw it. So the traditional end of the growing season, we might say, would be the fall, for a fair statement, at least for the purposes of my presentation. So if the end of the growing season is the fall, end of this year's growing season is the fall, then that would be the beginning of next year's growing season. Think of it that way. So, if it's the fall is when your winter squash are dying from downy mildew or powdery mildew, your potato plants have been long gone due to potato bugs. Your tomatoes went down to late blight. Anybody had late blight recently? Two people have had that? You don't want to talk about that either. I'm not even beginning to talk about that. Whatever your crop is, by fall, usually most of them are dying off. And so I like to think, the process of pulling all those crops out means that this is the weakest time of the year. This is when your soil has the least reserves left. It's the most worn. It's the most weak. So that would be the time when I would suggest you take a soil test. You take a soil test to figure out what's not in your soil. So you understand that you need some rudimentary level of nutrition, of elements, and then you say, okay, here is October, what do I not have? And what's my strategy going to be for getting them into the soil as as the year proceeds? Starting in the fall, a really good thing to do is take a soil test and source your minerals by whatever form you want. You can buy them at the hardware store. I don't care how you buy them, but you can get them in any number of different ways and apply your minerals to your soil. Another really critical thing to do, and maybe even that starts before October, is to apply cover crops. I'm a big fan of keeping the soil covered and alive, if at all possible. I like to say, where in nature do you see bare soil? Anybody? Desert.
Beach.
How vigorous is the nature doing? How vigorous is nature feeling in the desert? Not particularly. I like to say nature is modest and just to keep herself covered, and that's anthropomorphizing, I know, but so be it. Nature seems to like to keep herself covered, and so if you engage in a form of cropping that involves nature being bare all winter, or for months at a time, think about it. I mean, A, it's really hard on nature, and B, your soil life doesn't have any food, right? They don't have any sugar because there's nothing green growing. There's no organic matter on the surface of the soil, no duff. Anybody ever had a pile of leaves in the winter over here and bare soil over here? You take the leaves off, and the soil is so loose and just alive and moist in April when the soil that was bare is dry and hard. Right? She likes to stay covered, and if you can't keep her covered with something green growing like a cover crop, at least some kind of a mulch. I abuse mulch. I use it to extreme degrees. I bring in lots of mulch and I put it down and I keep myself covered. I don't have to do any weeding. In the fall, if I'm picking crops up into November and I don't have time to put a cover crop in, getting the soil mulched is a really good baseline. But things like tomatoes and cucumbers and chard and kale. There's a lot of crops that are fairly decent sized, and there's no reason you have to wait until they're dead or until you pull them out to put your cover crops in. So I like to say even by the middle of August or beginning of September, so cover crops. I like to wait for a big tropical storm or a thunderstorm or some kind of a big rain event coming and just broadcast them straight out in the field. And if you get a nice rain, that's enough moisture for them to germinate. Really, they like to be worked into the soil lightly, but if you play it right, you can establish your cover crops while your tomatoes are still growing, while your corn, squash, kale, all that kind of stuff is still growing. And so when those things die, they can just fall over, and your cover crops can keep growing. So establishing cover crops is big from my perspective.